Hello. For those of you who may be new to me, my name is Anne, and my work is meant to help those who wish to make their interior journey, their relationship with God, more authentic and also more incarnated, more embodied. Okay, so to move from understanding, learning and understanding things about how to draw closer to God or who God is, to actually being in relationship with God, and then to actually see that relationship with God bear fruit, okay, really bear fruit in their lives. So in today's video, I want to talk about something that goes a little deeper in understanding why different things are needed at different seasons in our journey, right? So if you've been following my podcast or if you've been following my content, you know that now and then I talk about seasons, and I sometimes throw away this line that, it's important to know what season you are in to know what you need to do or how you need to be, what you need to change up to continue to make this interior journey to God, to this interior journey of integration into greater healing, greater wholeness, into becoming who you were created to be, right? So now we need to zoom out, okay, a little now, looking at the interior journey, and consider that at different times in our life, we need different things, okay, to continue to make the interior journey. Now, there are 4 seasons, not where I live in Singapore. We're in a tropical climate, so there are no 4 seasons. There's basically just hot and wet or hot and dry. But many of you will be familiar with the 4 seasons, right? And I lived in Toronto, Canada for almost 10 years. And while I think right now I don't miss the bitter cold of the winter there, I really miss the rhythm of the 4 seasons. And so we all know there's winter, right, where it's cold, where things don't grow, everything's blanketed. If you're in a place that snows, everything's blanketed with snow. Nothing seems to be happening, and the night is longer. It's almost like nature is nudging us to slow down, to take it easier, to be more still, right? And after winter comes spring, right? There's a transition into spring, and then suddenly things are growing again. In fact, things can grow so rapidly and quickly when it's spring, right? One moment it seems like all the trees are just bare, right? And then they are covered in budding leaves, and then soon they're covered in flowers, and there's a riot of colors, and things just grow so fast in spring after the stillness and the rest of winter, right? And then after spring is summer, where it's usually the warmest, and the speed of growth slows down a little, but it's kind of like steady. Things are keeping steady, continuing to grow. And then after summer is autumn or fall, what you call it depending on where you live, right? Where, again, the growth slows even further. This is usually time for harvest. This is when you reap the fruit of what you've been growing, what you've been planting, right, in the prior seasons. You see the trees change colors again, and then the leaves fall, right? It's a slowing down. Again, after the growth and the richness of summer and of harvest, now slowing down back into winter, right? So every season is distinct, right? It happens every year. So it happens in cycles. It's not just a one-time thing, right? You don't just go through the 4 seasons one time in your lifetime. You cycle through them every year. Every time you cycle through, it's a little different, right? The 4 seasons remain distinct, but it's a little different. Each season may last a little shorter or longer. The particular experience of the season may be a little different from the last time. But there's a similarity to the rhythm of each season. Now that's what I want you to bring to mind, to kind of like have in mind when I now talk about the 4 seasons of the interior journey. Okay. I will be following this video up with a post also, okay, so that you will see in words kind of like what we're talking about, or what I'm talking about now. So the 4 seasons of the interior journey kind of reflect the different rhythms as well that I mentioned in nature. And I want to give a caveat first to say that when I'm going to be talking about these 4 seasons in a way that only applies to you if you are already intentionally making the interior journey, which means that in your life, this is already like the most important thing that features whatever else is happening in your life. You are committed to want to grow into your relationship with God, into becoming your true self. Okay. And it's okay if, I know for a lot of us, we go through many stages before we reach that point where we are continually committed. So once we become continually committed and intentional about making this journey, once our relationship with God becomes like the most important thing in our life, you're going to see these 4 seasons very regularly. Okay. In fact, I would wager, if you're someone who has already been going for, let's say, regular spiritual direction for years, perhaps, you've been trying to grow your spirituality, your spiritual life. You've been maybe going for therapy or counseling because you recognize that there are issues in your life that need healing. These 4 seasons may sound familiar to you. Okay, so I'm going to start with the first season, which I call healing. Okay, so the 4 seasons, just quickly first, the 4 seasons I'm going to be talking about is healing, deepening, equipping, and sending. Okay, the 4 seasons that we cycle through are healing, deepening, equipping, and sending. And it's important for us to know the distinction between the 4 seasons because the rhythm and the kind of work that's needed for each of these seasons are very different. And if we are not aware of what season we're in, and we kind of like we're doing the wrong thing, or we're living at the wrong pace, or we are trying to use resources that are very good for a different season, but not the season that we're in, we're going to be working against the Holy Spirit in some sense. We're going to be working against what God is actually trying to do in us, with us, in that particular season that we're in. Okay? So, and I also want to say, to some degree, at every point in our lives, we are in touch with all 4 seasons. Okay? So there are dimensions of all 4 seasons happening in our life all the time. But usually, there is a particular emphasis. One of the seasons feature more heavily in that, when in the season that we're in. So it's about identifying what's the primary season that we're in at any particular time. Okay, so the first season is healing. Okay, what do I mean by healing? I actually refer to healing is actually a disruptive season. Okay, for many of us, spiritual growth, interior growth is usually precipitated by some kind of powerful conversion experience, some kind of awakening, right? When we realize that, what the life that we have up to now, or what the life that we're living is, it's not it. And grace somehow permeates us, and we have a disruptive, beautifully, wonderfully disruptive, but usually kind of like a disruptive conversion experience. And we suddenly receive new revelations of ourselves. We experience new desire to make the interior journey, right? So there are these seasons where suddenly we feel like the track that I've been on is not enough, right? And I need to shift gears, and I need to change. This season of healing also usually it includes a surge of desire to want to grow into a more loving relationship and to grow in our capacity, okay, to love God, to love ourselves, and to love our neighbor in some sense, right? So this is a disruptive season, okay? It's a powerful season, but it's also a disruptive season. When we are in a season of healing, usually it feels like everything is new. There are a lot of things happening. This is kind of like, we can be very excited, or we can be very overwhelmed. We don't usually feel like we have a good handle on what's going on. what God is doing in our life, okay, all we feel is that there's a lot of new life in us. There's a lot of new life in us that makes us want to go forward. And when we're in this season of healing, what we need usually is some kind of help from someone or from more than one person, let's say, who know how to hold us in this season of change and give us some sense of some kind of stability. Okay, it can be very reassuring when we are in a season of healing to have people around us that can assure us that whatever it is that we're experiencing, all these new experiences, new sensations that we may think is very strange and very foreign, that they're normal, that they're normal signs of God at work in our lives. Okay, so that's the first season. I'm just talking about them rather briefly. In future, I will maybe go a little deeper into each of these seasons, and certainly if you're someone who is working with me in the container of my coaching program, we will be going much deeper into things like these 4 seasons. So that's the season of healing. Now, in my experience, a lot of people especially in the faith context, when they have conversion experiences, when they have gone through a season of healing, they assume that now I'm all different, and now it's time for me to serve. Now it's time for me to give back. And they're skipping seasons, okay, and skipping stages. So remember, right now I'm just talking about like the 4 seasons in one cycle, okay? In our life, in our journey, we will be going through many cycles of the 4 seasons, okay? As we mature in our relationship with God, in our relationship with ourselves, we will go through many times a season of healing, right? And then it will be followed by a season of deepening. Okay, so think about it. Healing is when everything shifts, the trajectory changes, the direction changes. We kind of can feel like the rug is being pulled out from under our feet. It can be confusing. Now, after that has happened, what usually needs is a season of consolidating. Okay, so now I'm in a new direction. It's unfamiliar, it's new, and then now I need to deepen in my new direction. I need to soak in the new things that God is revealing to me in my life about myself, right? I need to stew. Okay, so deepening, the season of deepening is kind of like stewing and letting that experience that we have in the season of healing soak through into us, more deeply into our core. If this season doesn't happen, like if we don't give time for a season of deepening, if we try and skip ahead from fresh conversion experience and healing straight into trying to be very active and serving, what will often happen is that we don't continue to grow. In fact, we can get very disillusioned because we realize that very quickly, whatever we received in the season of healing is quickly spent, right? Like we don't have that energy anymore. And we think, why was it that experience was so real when I was experiencing my conversion, when I was going through that healing? Why is it that my capacity is still so low in spite of the very powerful healing experience that I've had, conversion experiences that I've had? One likely reason is that you did not give enough time for deepening, okay? The season of deepening isn't usually very exciting. The season of deepening is usually a lot more focused on what's happening within you, okay? People on the outside can't quite see what's going on. But that's the point. That's the point. When you've gone through a season of healing, it's just the start, right, of a new direction, a new trajectory. You need to grow roots, right? So the season of deepening is about growing roots. It's about growing roots into this new reality that God has revealed to us. It's about deepening our roots and learning maybe, a new way of being with God, because the old ways of praying for us just doesn't feed us anymore in this new trajectory. Okay, you'll know what I'm talking about if you've been taking your interior journey seriously for some time. You'll know that very often what used to work for you after you have got disrupt your life again, somehow what used to work for you doesn't work anymore, right? And a lot of times people get worried. They think that there's something wrong, but really there's nothing wrong. That's the way it is. That's what happens, right? So now in the season of deepening, after we have had the season of healing, it's about learning maybe new ways of being with God, perhaps new forms of prayer, right? Perhaps availing ourselves to spiritual direction more regularly, maybe counseling or therapy more regularly, to help us get more anchored in the new reality that God has revealed to us. Okay, so that's a season of deepening. Healing, conversion, big change. Deepening, where there's mostly more stillness, more quiet, more solitude. The energies are inwards. The energy is focused inwards because the focus of the season of deepening is God deepening the roots of our conversion experiences, the roots of our healing experiences. Okay. Then what happens usually after a season of deepening would be a season of equipping. Okay, so equipping, we begin to be a little bit more active again. Okay, in a sense, if the season of deepening was kind of like stillness and depth, and just more contemplative, as in really more time spent in just stewing in the love of God, right? And deeper healing, because you're letting the healing deepen, then the season of equipping is usually we are getting ready. Okay, it's like we are getting ready again to go out. We're getting ready to move out into the world, with greater energy. But you see, we're different now, right? Because we're different from the last cycle, or like we're different from who we were or where we were before we've undergone this most recent layer of healing and then deepening. So now in the season of equipping, usually, we get greater clarity about ourselves, where we are right now. We get greater clarity about maybe what we need to learn, what skills we need to sharpen, because we're discerning, we're clearer in our discernment as to maybe the next step in my life, or the next step in my discernment of my personal vocation, which is really, that big picture of who God created me to be and the work that He has created me to offer my life for, right? So in the season of equipping, I may pick up skills, or where I come from, people love to study, as in formal study, so sometimes it may take the form of maybe going for some course, some program, getting some kind of certification, but it doesn't have to be formal, right? It may just be, I have a sense that the Lord maybe is, so for me, for example, maybe there's to hone my ability to articulate the interior journey at one point. That was part of my equipping, right? Because it feels like that's what God created me to do, to articulate the interior journey, to talk about the interior journey. So the season of equipping. Where I am in my life right now, the equipping part of this cycle also includes learning new skills, like, with using technology, using new software, as part of what God wants to send me out to do, right? So that's why the season of equipping flows into a season of sending. So the season of sending is literally, it's sending. It's when we are sent. It's like, I'm going to give you another image now, of, let's say, a ship, right? This is an image that actually came up a lot in my own prayer, in my own interior life, that at a certain time, my last cycle of going deep into healing and deepening, the image I had was of a ship that, has been out at sea and has been knocked around, by storms and whatnot, and it needs repair, right? And while it was out at sea, there was emergency repairs that had to be done so that it could continue to sail. But then it got brought back into harbor, and then into the dock, and then it was drained of all, water. So now it's in dry dock, and really deep repair could happen for the ship. Now, for me, that was the season of deepening, the healing and the deepening. And then at some point in my prayers, the image came that, God was reminding me a ship is not made to just sit in dry dock, right? The season of being in dry dock is necessary for deep repair to make it more seaworthy. In fact, in this kind of sense, in the interior life, to make the ship even more seaworthy than it used to be. Because now, when it's being readied, right, out of the deep repair and then it's being equipped, everything is seaworthy again. When it goes out to sea, it's going to be out even longer and can sail even further. It can be even more seaworthy than before. So in the season of sending, the emphasis of our energies will not be so much on the healing and on the deepening. They are still there because it's always ongoing, right? But it'll be more of the equivalent of how do I sustain from day to day? I clear what I need to clear when I realize I'm wounded, or when I realize I'm acting or reacting out of my scripts, or I realize that I'm not centered or anchored in my identity as God's beloved. What do I do to come back to the center? What do I need to do to deepen and soak in again God's message to me about who I am? So in a daily kind of way, and the background, that continues to happen. But the vast majority of the energy in a season of sending is on service, is on mission, okay? And it's on just going out there and being out there and outpouring of the gifts that God has been building and growing within us, right? So the season of sending is kind of like harvest time, right? The fruits are plenty, and you're sharing the fruits of your previous seasons with the world, with the people that God is sending you to, right? So these 4 seasons, the way we allocate our time and our resources will have to change. Say you're in a season of sending, even God is saying, I'm sending you out, go, you have all this fruit now, go. We have to go. We have to move out, right? It wouldn't be appropriate or fruitful or helpful if I still want to just stew and deepen, because ultimately the most important thing about interior life, if this is a relationship with God, we follow His prompts, right? We trust Him. We want to grow in trust in Him. We want to grow in our ability to hear God and to move at His prompting. We trust that He is the one who's guiding us and leading us at a certain pace with a certain rhythm. We trust that rhythm because it's God's rhythm for us. But at the same time, we are still growing in our ability to trust Him. We're still growing in our ability to hear Him, to be able to discern. We're still growing in our ability to have the freedom to follow Him, right? So this that's why there are many cycles of the 4 seasons, right? And that's why it's important to be able to follow His prompts from different season to different season, right? So what I often see in my observation is that, so I said the 4 seasons are healing, right? Some powerful conversion experience, and God shifts our trajectory, our life trajectory. We see some things, new things and everything, and we get very excited about it. A lot of people skip from that to sending. Okay, they skip from just that healing to, okay, now I want to go out and I want to serve. I want to offer my service to people, to the kingdom. And like I said earlier, when we skip the seasons, or when we don't follow the rhythm of the seasons, if we don't allow healing to go into deepening, and then from deepening to go into equipping, before we allow ourselves to be sent, before we kind of go out, what's going to happen is that our roots are very shallow. There are barely any roots at all. And what would happen is that we might find ourselves, in our life, just cycling through, going after conversion experience after conversion experience, and then trying to serve, so to speak, or whereas service is that we think we have something to offer, and then we find that actually we don't, or that quickly runs out, and then we think that the fix for that is more conversion experiences, more healing. That won't bring us really deeper into a more integrated interior life, right? So I think just being aware that there are different seasons to the interior life, and that we need to be able to be attuned as to what season we're in, and then to move accordingly and to give ourselves permission to slow down or to speed up, according to the season that we're in. And that's so important, because I'll tell you, for example, when you go into a season of deepening, there's a lot of silence and stillness. And those of us who think that our value rests on our ability to contribute, and we hear all these voices, and sometimes it doesn't help that people keep saying, without the understanding of the seasons, that it's important for us to serve, right? When God's invitation to us is to be still and to rest and to deepen, we busy ourselves with serving, so we never deepen. And conversely, sometimes those of us who are in a season of sending, of being out there and on mission, we may feel like, I'm not spending as much time as I used to when I was in the season of deepening, and maybe in the season of deepening and equipping, I was able to spend a lot more time, journaling, reflecting, reading, and being in prayer and contemplation. And that season, that's very beautiful, right? And that's really rich. We really enjoy that season of stillness, of deepening. But when we're in a season of sending, it's like, it's time to move. And we can't expect the luxury, in that sense, of that many hours, maybe even in a day, or that many retreats in a year, right? Because sometimes in longer seasons of deepening, for some people, it may even be that they're on sabbatical from work. They may take a break from work and they could go on longer retreats. They can really tend to their inner space, right? For months. That's not the norm for us, right? And when we are out back in the season of being sent, the emphasis or the majority of our energy is going to be on outpouring. And that is why after a season of sending, the Lord will always bring us back into a season of healing, right? Which means that at some point, there's going to be another disruption in our life. There's going to be another... So, excuse me, my dog is whining. Okay. All right. Sorry, what was I saying? So okay. Yes, Miko wants to join the live stream. Okay, so we need to honor the seasons that we're in, basically, right? We need to honor the seasons that we're in. And we're going to find that cycling through these 4 seasons over and over is often God's way of helping us to be more attuned to His prompting, to help us grow in obedience, right? Obedience in the sense of that deep sense of listening to Him, hearing Him, and following what it is that He's actually inviting us into. And we know that in some sense, these seasons they're inevitable. Like, for as long as you're committed intentionally to continue to grow in your interior journey, in your relationship with God, you will notice these 4 seasons, right? Yeah. So, but if you're not yet, or if there are times when, we're not intentional about our interior journey, you're not going to notice the 4 seasons. And usually that just seems to be like, that pre-healing kind of a season, if there's such a season, like we're just living from moment to moment, maybe looking for God only when we're in crisis, right? So there are always going to be opportunities to enter the intentional journey. And when we've entered intentional journey, we will experience these 4 seasons of healing and deepening, equipping, and sending, right? So I don't know if there are any questions that you have about these 4 seasons. Please send me a DM, or you can leave a comment in the, under the video, because I'm going to be saving this live, and I will also be sharing this video eventually on YouTube. This is it's a gist, okay? But I hope that you find it helpful, and maybe that it may shed some light as to why you may be stuck in your interior journey, why at one point you felt like you were growing well, and then you just kind of got stuck. Okay, that happens a lot, and I see that happen a lot. And usually what is happening is that you've moved into a different season and you don't realize that, and you're trying to use what worked in the previous season in your current season, and that's not what is called for. That's not what God is inviting you to. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this explanation or introduction just to the 4 seasons, and I look forward to sharing maybe more about some of these seasons in future. Bye.